This is super exciting. I'm here with 3 friends of mine, 2 of which I've worked with at Twitter, actually. And I'll spend a couple of minutes introducing the panel, and then we'll dive right in. So, to the left of me here is Sarah. Sarah has a Bachelor of Engineering degree from University of Waterloo, one of the best universities in Canada. And she started out at Google. Then she went over to Twitter, to Periscope, to Vine, some of the most amazing companies out there. A really amazing background. And now she's a director of engineering at Twitter. So Guido here actually has his roots in Germany. Started with a diploma in physics. Then he did robotics in Tokyo. Got a PhD at Stanford. He actually helped Larry Page and Sergey with their first business model for Google. He wrote the business plan with them.
I helped, yeah.
And then he started the company called Voltage Security, which got bought by HP, and became a professor at Stanford. Is the CEO and founder of a company called Big Switch Networks. And now he is the CTO of the networking and cloud division of VMware, which is a company that's worth north of $50 billion. Larry here also started at Google, actually, after getting a Bachelor of Software Engineering. He was the youngest employee at Google. You were at Google when you were what?
I'm not sure what the actual number was at the time. It was like 18 or something, but it was an internship, so I don't know if that counts.
Yes, it counts. And then Larry also worked at Twitter with me, and now he's the CEO and founder of Envoy. So I'll give everybody 30 seconds to talk about what they're working on and what the companies are doing. So maybe, Sarah, you want to start out?
Sure. So right now I'm working primarily on video at Twitter. So that's VOD video, live video, Periscope. We say anything that's greater than 1 frame of picture falls under the wheelhouse. So engineering on video.
Guido, what does VMware do?
So VMware builds software that powers many of the largest data centers in the world, and basically helps large enterprises manage applications across their data center landscape. And for us, the big transition at the moment is that classically these are on-prem data centers, and in the future, as everything's moving to the cloud, our business is moving to the cloud as well. So we're now working closely with Amazon and other cloud partners on products.
What does Envoy do?
I'm Larry. Envoy is basically whenever you walk into somebody's office and there's like an iPad up front and you got to type in your name and who you're there to see. We make that product, and it's in 7,000 daily active businesses, and it's just all over the world basically with people just wanting to make their kind of impression of their company when people walk in to be a little bit more modern and up to date, and all sorts of great security benefits and all that. And just recently we started a new deliveries product around just making it kind of this easy place to, whenever packages come in, register them quickly and make sure people pick them up instead of building a big pile.
Awesome. So all of our background is engineering, and let's dive right in. So the pace of engineering, or the pace of technology is not really showing any signs of slowing down. In fact, the technology landscape is getting more and more complex as we speak. So how, in this age of complexity, can the next generation of engineer really keep up? Maybe, Sarah, you want to take this one first.
I mean, technology has always moved so fast, and a lot of engineers either increase the breadth of their knowledge or they start to go very deep in a specific area and get to specialize. And the way in which we communicate has evolved and changed. Forums have moved into Slack groups, cross-functional Slack groups, cross-organizational Slack groups where we talk to each other. We use Twitter, we use Facebook, we use all sorts of different ways to communicate, to let each other know what are the new and upcoming things. And then, of course, conferences like this to find out what the latest industry trends are.
Okay, so the engineer that just lives in the basement has no contact to the outside world, that's a myth. Larry?
Yeah, I think these days these engineers are a little bit more involved than living in a basement. We like to open up the windows here and there, but Yeah, the world is getting significantly more complicated, but there's so much technology and so many easy ways. Like you go on a GitHub, you see all this code. It's really not that complicated to get up to speed. So I think a lot of people are able to learn a lot more, even though things are more complicated. So that's kind of nice.
And so, Guido, you run probably between all of us the largest engineering organization out there. How has engineering changed at VMware, and how has engineering actually changed throughout your career?
I think, so if I have to look at this, I think the currently biggest change is that classically, a software engineer would build software and then sort of throw it over the fence to an operations team, and the operations team would run the software. And that model is currently breaking up and moving to these DevOps team, where basically you have one team of engineers that builds the software, then also operates it as a software as a service, when it's up and running. And that really changes the responsibility of an engineering team, right? Before it was, you built the software, you're done. Now suddenly, you built the software. The engineering team often makes the decision whether to go live with the software. So you need an engineering team that can make decisions about, is this secure enough? Is this compliant, right? You suddenly have engineers sitting in compliance reviews, right? We made some changes. Does this still match GDPR? Can we switch this live or not? At the end of the day, it's the engineering team that's ultimately responsible for that. So I think the hard part for engineering teams right now is managing this change and broadening their knowledge and their scope, so they can really fulfill these new tasks that previously they hadn't.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool, actually. Like these days, you have easy access, depending on your company's scale. You can even go as simple as something like Heroku, and you can just get, like, without even knowing really what you're doing, you can literally just get started, put it online, iterate on it super quickly. You don't need a bunch of DevOps people. You don't need a bunch of people to help you buy servers. You don't need all this extra effort. You can just kind of do it. And in fact, that's actually how Envoy got started really quickly. It's when we built the original version, it was running on Heroku, and it was running on some shared database. And as we grew, we started splitting things off, especially with GDPR. We, of course, now have to silo things and different PII levels, but it's just so much easier now. And that's really nice, because I want to worry about building the product, not all the little things that come up as gotchas.
So switching gears a little bit, Sarah, you've worked at some of the most hyped companies out there and some of the most successful companies out there. How was your journey from being an individual contributor where you wrote code? You actually wrote one of the first Android app for Twitter, right? And now you're running an engineering team. How has this journey been? And maybe you can generalize a little bit how this works generally in Silicon Valley.
Sure. So for me, actually, I've gone back and forth between being a manager and being an individual contributor a few times, and now I'm probably a manager for the long haul. But when you're thinking about building an engineering team, as an individual contributor, you're thinking about building the product, and how are you writing the code, and how are you building the product? And as a manager, you're really thinking about, how am I building the team, and am I setting my team up for success so that they can do their best work? And it's a bit of a mind shift change. But so the journey there was that I've just been fortunate enough to work with really great people who have always encouraged me to go into management, and so here I am.
And Guido, at VMware, you guys probably live and breathe engineering. I mean, the company was founded by Diane Green.
We have a few of them, yeah.
So how can you, if you don't want to go down a management track, how can you be successful as an engineer? And what does that success actually look like? I mean, maybe you can share some Silicon Valley stats of the top individual contributors, what they do and how they're comped.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Florian. I think for me, one of the biggest differences in how engineering is run in Silicon Valley versus, for example, Germany, or frankly, many other parts of the world, right, is that in Germany, if you want to really make a career as an engineer, at some point you have to move into management, right? You can only go so high as an individual contributor. At some point, you basically peter out. And that's actually very different in Silicon Valley, right? There's this saying that a really good software engineer has 10x the output of a bad software engineer, and that is absolutely true, right? I mean, we have engineers in our organization where I would, I'm ready to sign. They have really 10x the output, 10x the impact on our products, our bottom line, on solving our customers' problems, than other engineers have. And if they produce 10x the output, that means it makes sense economically to give them 10x the compensation, what a normal engineer would have. So at VMware and in many Silicon Valley companies, other companies as well, there's this whole career track for an individual contributor engineer, how just by being an engineer, you can sort of move into a more and more senior architect role. You can go from staff engineer, senior staff engineer, distinguished engineer, principal engineer, fellow, where a fellow is, depending on the company in Silicon Valley, typically somewhere at a VP or even senior VP level, right? So these are people making fantastic salaries, right? And in many cases, they make 3 or 4 times the salary of their manager, right?
So how much?
Incredibly valuable. In some companies, they make over $1 million total comp a year.
So an individual contributor and engineer can make over $1 million in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Well, they're providing that value, and I think that's what's really important. Like even at Envoy, we definitely have individual contributors that get paid more than their managers. In fact, it happens all the time that an IC will turn into a manager, and they will see no increase in pay and just an increase in headaches because management. So it's pretty common, but it's like it's really important that you don't force the engineer. Like everybody wants to get better in their lives, and especially in their career. And it really sucks because engineering is kind of a practice where you're best at doing your thing, and management is very, very different from that. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with structure, you're dealing with these concepts that are not logical as well, which is not exactly the greatest thing for an engineer. So what happens is you force these people in positions they shouldn't be in, and then that's when like they basically just operate based on what they've seen on TV, what they can kind of read, and it's just they don't really enjoy it as much. And though they may get paid better in places outside the valley, it's really not a good spot to put them in.
I think one of the interesting things about engineering management, especially in Silicon Valley, is that the engineers are really the star. And the mindset for the manager is not, just make your engineer do, be better or be more productive or whatever. It's how are you going to change your management style to harness the talent of an individual engineer, and how does that change from engineer to engineer? And as a manager, the challenge there, I think, is a very different mindset than how it might be outside of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, they're telling you what they're going to do, not the other way around. It's like if I started telling all of my engineers or my staff kind of what they have to do and that kind of thing, like they would just leave the company and go join something else. And it's really important to keep a very bottoms-up management structure when dealing with these highly specialized people, because they are brilliant people, much smarter, especially at the thing they do, than anybody up top. So you have to let them kind of thrive and come up with their ideas and build their ideas, and let them fail too. Even though you may suspect that they may fail, you just have to let them, because that's how they're going to learn. But it's your job as a manager, or in my case CEO, to build an environment that allows them to kind of learn and screw up all the time. But that's just what makes it fun, and that's how the innovations happen.
So talking about 10x engineering and talking about actually performance, it's well known that diverse teams, there's various studies out there by the leading research companies, that diverse teams perform much better. And I think right now we're having this debate in Silicon Valley around diversity and how important diversity is when you're building a company. And I know all of you have really strong opinions about that. So Sarah, maybe for you as a manager, when you start hiring, how do you ensure that you have a diverse team and that you can hire people from all backgrounds? Yeah,
so I'll start by saying that I'm a big advocate for women in engineering. I work with an organization called Girls Who Code that encourages young girls to get into science, technology, engineering, and math. I personally started programming when I was 8 or 9 or whatever, and I want that for a lot of women who don't necessarily, a lot of girls who don't necessarily see this as an opportunity at that age. The way I think about it, and the way I know Twitter thinks about it, is we know that diverse teams produce better, and one of the ways that I internalize that day to day is that healthy debate is such an important part of team dynamic. And if you're hiring people that think the same as you, that have had the same experiences as you, you are hiring an echo chamber for your same ideas. And if I think the trick is how do you hire someone that's going to you're going to get along with and is going to be a good fit for your company that can also provide you with the healthy debate that you need, so that you're not just creating an echo chamber of your own ideas. And that diversity of thought, I think, is what really helps teams come up with better and more innovative solutions. And one way to achieve diversity of thought, of course, is diversity of background, diversity of gender, diversity of age.
Yeah, creativity is so important, and you're not going to get creativity by a bunch of white dudes in a room. Like, you need to get a very diverse set of people as early on as possible, and just talk to everyone. And you just get really great results that you would have never thought about. And it's just so important, especially in the Valley where everyone's trying to one-up each other on their creativity, on their kind of business, their new idea that they have. So, yeah.
So Guido, with you being German, you might have followed the debate in Germany where it's being discussed to have actually a quota. I think the quota is the proposed quota is to have women be represented with 30% or higher in organizations. What do you think about that? Like, do you think that's the solution? And how at VMware do you actually try to solve for getting more diversity into your organization?
Yeah. So, and it's I think the short answer is there's no quick and easy answer here, right? I mean, in software engineering, you sort of operating with a handicap as the graduation rates. Yeah, if you look at the computer science graduates, you have the percentage of women is much smaller there than the percentage of men, and that makes it difficult to get to anything close to even, right? It's the goal. Like, I think, as was pointed out, more diverse teams make better decisions. I like working much better in a diverse team, and it helps you for hiring. So. We're putting a lot of focus on the recruiting side. So basically, early in the funnel, trying to identify, woman candidates, minority candidates, and trying to attract them, and trying to retain them by offering the right career ladders. But it's a lot of internal discussions, hard work.
It's a dialogue with any kind of ecosystem.
I'll just comment a moment on the quotas. I know that there are lots of arguments on both sides. I think one of the benefits of the quotas is it allows a shortcut for the intrinsic systemic disadvantages that women have had in the entire pipeline for years, that they're just built into the system. We can't change them all overnight. I would love to change them all overnight. Yeah. One shortcut to making it better. It's nice for us to say, we're not going to discriminate, we're going to treat everyone equally, all of those things. But the very standards that we have set have been ones that have allowed more men to succeed than women. And so the standards themselves are already inherently biased. So one way to shortcut that is a quota.
And but diversity doesn't really just stop at the gender discussion, right? Like, it's broader than that. Larry, maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little tricky because a quota system will help short term. I think that it kind of sets the wrong kind of incentives. There's a lot of different types. It's male, female. There's a lot of different people of all colors of the rainbow, and it's kind of like you want equal access for everybody, not just one particular type of person. But it's kind of, yeah, so it's really important you get everybody. And that's, I think, one thing that we like to focus on at Envoy as well. It's kind of, San Francisco's pretty diverse these days just by so many different types of people going in there. But you still do have to make a strong effort. And it's just access to so many more people as well. But you have to show that, and you have to kind of just enable them. Yeah.
So I think this is a good segue into another topic, which is this war for talent. In Silicon Valley, you have some companies that obviously have the war chest to hire the brightest minds out there. They have probably more money than startups. How do you compete with a company like VMware when you want to hire engineers?
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, the amount of signed offers that I've seen where they don't start is incredible. Yeah, fun fact, signed offer doesn't mean they're actually.
The signature means nothing.
Yeah, no, it happens everywhere.
So you mean someone signs the offer letter and then doesn't show up for work.
Yeah, that happens all the time. I can name multiple people that have done that, and then we go back, and then they go back again. So it's really, really tough. And as a company, I think I kind of like that, even though it's incredibly stressful, and I lose an unmeasurable amount of sleep over it. But it kind of keeps every company on their A game, because if you don't play perfectly, if you don't provide a really great atmosphere for these people, they're going to leave you and go somewhere else. They are not going to your company because you're paying them. They're going to your company because it's a great atmosphere and it's a place that they want to build themselves and that a place they believe in. The company does not have control over these people, so it's wonderful. Like it's scary but wonderful, and it creates, again, that buy-in that's so important to build the new things. Yeah, it just comes at loss of sleep and all sorts of fighting, but yeah.
Yeah, so let me give you one example of how this looks like in practice in Silicon Valley. So in one of my startups, we had this guy we really wanted to hire. We were after him for months, and he finally, said he's going to come in for interviews on a Friday. So he shows up Friday morning, and he goes like, "Look, I'm really sorry, but at short notice yesterday, your main competitor asked me to come in, and I spent the whole day with them and interviewed with them, and yesterday evening I signed an offer letter with them, and I'm actually gonna work for them. I just want to tell you in person, after all, we scheduled this interview already."
He still came in for the free food, though.
He still came in for free food. We were like, "Look, let's talk about this, right?" So we start talking to him. We run it by a couple of people. We have 2 of our board members call him, and after working him for the whole day, basically in the evening was like, "Okay, I'm going to change my mind. I'm actually going to start with you guys." So he called the other guys and said, "Sorry, I'm not going to work for you," and he signed with us. And we're like, "Okay, we want to lock this in." So you give him his T-shirt, you give him his laptop, right? To make sure that he can't go back anymore. And we're like, "Okay, mission accomplished," right? Come Monday morning, the CTO of our competitor plus that employee come to our office to drop off his laptop because over the weekend our competitor had turned him around again, right?
Yeah, it happens all the time.
All the time.
In another case, an employee, after one of these recruiting back and forth, he called in sick for a week because he was so stressed out from the recruiting process. So these are intense battles for talent.
Yeah, we just had somebody recently who, it was a similar process. They were going to get hired by their old manager at a new company. I was aggressively going after them too because this is a superstar. Problem is, the guy was so stressed out at the end, he said, "You know what, I'm just going to stay where I am today. I don't know what I was thinking." Yeah, so that wasn't great. However, a couple months later, persistence always works, and the person works with us now. But yeah, we'll see how long that
competition
goes
is
for.
fierce. It's very fierce. I actually recently had a situation in in London where someone had signed. So it's already come to Europe. Someone had signed and went to the competitor instead.
And so you mentioned perks. So I've heard the word perks a couple of times here. So how important are perks like good food? At Twitter, you guys have an amazing cafeteria where you can get, I don't know, the rumor is lobster bisque for lunch.
You can get lobster over there?
I haven't had any lobster, but we eat well. If there's lobster, someone needs to tell me where it is. The baseline of perks in Silicon Valley is high. And so if you're not offering at least the baseline, engineers will question that because they're like, well, all these other companies offer this as a base, so it's important. But the actual perks themselves, I think, matter more to new grads. Maybe, from 0 to 3 or 4 years outside of their career. As you progress in the career, I think some of those perks become less important. Folks are more interested in long-term benefits and 401k and retirement savings, all that stuff.
Do you offer in your startup a lot of perks?
Yeah, we have some perks. I think a lot of the time you can kind of say that like, "Oh yeah, we're a startup," and then like you don't have to do all the different meals of the day. But we do we do lunch. And the reason we do lunch is because we used to not do lunch, and then all these people kind of went to different restaurants and coffee shops and all that to grab lunch, and it just took forever. And people were like, "I don't want to go out for like a whole hour and like try to find food and line up and all that." So for, I think it's like $15 a head or something, we basically have a catering company that comes in and then just like unloads a ton of food, and then people like run over there. They've created apps and stuff to know when the food arrives, and then they just eat it, and then off they go. We don't do breakfast, and we only do dinner once a week as like a team bonding thing. And I don't know, that may change at some point if there's demand, but right now it doesn't seem like it's the biggest thing.
For startups, the group ordering apps for delivery have been really, really popular. We did that at Vine, because we didn't have a catering company in our small office, so we just did a group order on Seamless.
Yeah, it's cool. Like you can start like a shared order on like Caviar or something,
Yep.
and then everybody just picks their weird food, and of course the company pays for all this, and then
So
you
Guido,
burn through your runway, and there's all that wonderful stuff. But I mean, hopefully you can make revenue.
One of my startups, at one point, we had 3 different espresso machines for a team of about 15 people because the engineers couldn't quite agree on what type of espresso machine they wanted. It was like, okay, whatever. We'll make it happen.
So it sounds like the engineers in Silicon Valley are really spoiled.
They can be, but it's also like, I don't know, it's not that much of a cost. Like an espresso machine, let's just say, is like $10,000 for like a really nice one. It's more, but it's still like
$10,000 for an espresso
you're
machine?
paying these people, like they're coming out of school getting 120, 140K. I think you can do $10,000 in an espresso machine one time. Hopefully they don't break it because that also happens. But it's just like, hopefully the product, and I think this is actually a good thing too. Companies are expected to spend a lot of money on their people internally, but it's kind of pushing for like, you're going to burn through your runway very quickly if you keep spending like this. So what this kind of pushes for is more and more companies that are making revenue and are able to sustain themselves. And I think that that's a really important motion that people kind of forgot about a while ago. And now more and more companies are like a proper, somewhat decent business plan where they can make money and stay alive.
Do you think it actually sets maybe a bad tone to be so, spending so frivolously? Do you think that is that it has some long-term dangers for Silicon Valley?
It's a little pompous, but like, I don't know, it's just so normal now that it doesn't really change. It's not that bad. I've heard some weird benefits at other companies, but yeah, I think it's calming down a little bit. It used to be a lot crazier, but now it's a little bit more calm, and you start getting stuff like, hey, we have a credit so you can take like Envoy offers $100 towards Lyft on a monthly basis, so you can use it to get between work and somewhere else. And that just makes it easy if people want to stay late or whatever. They don't have to worry about getting like stabbed on the street or something. Not that happens, but I don't know. It's just like if you're late, yeah.
Look, I think as you said, it boils down to the question of how much do you invest in your engineers, right? And all the perks combined as a percentage of the overall cost of the engineer is still relatively low, right? In Silicon Valley, office space is ridiculously expensive, right? You try to save money by, at least in my startups, packing them very, very densely, right? The new college grad, at this point, 110, 120, 130 is pretty common. So, senior engineer, you're looking at north of 200. So at the end of the day, paying for espressos and the $100 Lyft credit doesn't move the needle much.
I think that's why it happened.
Okay, switching gears a tiny bit. Some of the largest companies in the world, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, have been founded by engineers. And I think if you look at Europe, we don't have the same level of success. At least, there are obviously some outliers there. There are companies like Spotify and so forth that have their roots here in Skype. But in general, the most valuable companies have origins in and around Silicon Valley. Why do you think that is? And what could we in Germany learn in order to maybe have the next Facebook come out of Germany? Maybe Guido, you can speak to it first.
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, my origins in Silicon Valley are from Stanford, right? And so a typical Stanford startup starts as a technological solution looking for a problem, right? It's not market driven at all. It's like, hey, we have this cool new algorithm. What could we use it for, right? Let's see if anybody wants to buy it for something, right? And you start building a company around it. We have a new algorithm for, making web content searchable. Let's build a search engine around this, right? And look, it's better than others, right? It's really very much bottoms up. I think in Germany, you have a lot of good engineering teams, you have a lot of good research teams that come up with these ideas, right? So I think that's definitely there. One thing that is definitely different, at least in Silicon Valley, is that you have 3 engineers around the table, they have a new algorithm, and they're asking the question, well, how can we build a product here to achieve world domination? Right? I mean, you immediately start thinking about building the #1 market leader in the world and what it would take to get there, right? Which in Germany, they often don't aim that high in the first step. So I think that is a difference. I mean, the other thing is, I think in Silicon Valley, at least for certain industries, it's much easier to build these kind of companies, because a lot of your partner ecosystem, a lot of the expertise in that particular space is around you, right? I mean, look at my last startup in the networking space, right? And if you look at our top partners were big networking companies, Cisco, 10-minute drive, Juniper, 12-minute drive, and you can go down the list, and probably the top 5 or so are within driving distance, right? That makes it much easier to get these things off the ground.
There's a lot of investors too. Investors are really very just progressive. It's usually just a bunch of rich people that made it big in like the 90s or a little bit later on, and now it's their turn to invest money, and they basically think the same way as the engineers and the companies there. So they're much more comfortable investing in these high-risk kind of companies, but the formula still holds. Like if you create something new and really innovative, it'll work. So you do get support there too.
So I'm kind of hearing accessibility to others is really important. Is that how you also recruit? How you actually make sure you stay on top of what's going on in technology?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just add to what you said, that if you give a very smart engineer and encourage them to think innovatively and with a little bit of entrepreneurship, the founders that you mentioned, they are the idols that I had growing up. That I'm sure these guys have looked up to, and that's the culture that engineers are entering into in Silicon Valley. That at the top of your game, you could be, Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or whoever. And so I think that mentality as an engineer, if you can foster some entrepreneurship there, you can go places. And I even saw that at Waterloo while I was there. When I joined Waterloo, we didn't have an entrepreneurship program. By the time I left, we had incubators. We had so many entrepreneurship programs to encourage the engineers to pursue.
So before we got here on stage, we talked a little about, we also talked about accessibility and how easy it is in Silicon Valley to get pretty much access to anyone. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit. I mean, how?
Yeah. It's really not too hard. Like I mean, you'll just be at a regular restaurant and there'll just be this like industry leader that's like literally having coffee or whatever near you. So they don't hide themselves. They just hang out like the rest of them. And it's also because a lot of them are just these engineers. They're a little slightly weird and they just want to hang out like the rest of us kind of thing. So there's easy accessibility. Everyone wants to introduce themselves to each other, and it's really important. And what I've noticed a lot there is that people will just do whatever they can to help each other out, even though nothing may be promised in return right away. Like people will just go out of their way to help you in whatever way they can, and hopefully in the future it'll help them out. And it almost always does, and that's what I've found too. And it's kind of great because it comes at the time when you need it most, and you just get all the help you need. So introductions are easy to do. Everybody meets with everybody. The access to talent and information, even with us, like when we're hiring for executive roles, I've never run HR before, but I have access to all of the major people and all the different companies that have, and I can ask them questions about what to do in certain circumstances. So that's really nice. It's a great set of people in one area.
I'll counter that with a slightly different perspective. I think for people who are not in Silicon Valley and not in the, haven't worked at one of the big companies, it can actually feel a bit like a clique, like a club that's hard to get into. And I think I think when we're in it, it's hard to see sometimes that it's a bit daunting.
Your perspective, Guido.
I think two things. One thing is, I think it has probably changed a little bit, right? And 10 years ago, Silicon Valley was still felt a bit newer than it is today. I mean, all that being said, if I compare Silicon Valley to, say, New York or something like that, it still feels a ton more open, right? I mean, it's little things like at the Stanford Computer Science Department, you have a professor, seed investor in Google, multi-billionaire. his office door is still always open. You don't have to talk to his secretary in order. You can just go in and talk to him if you want to talk to him. Right? There's this very open culture. It always blows me away in Silicon Valley who I can send an email to and basically say like, "Hi, I'm Guido. You've never heard of me. There's something interesting I'd like to talk about." And the person's like, "Yeah, let's have coffee." Right? Yeah. And this works at a VP level. This works at a CEO level. Right? And it's like, I always wonder, do these guys have nothing better to do than talking to me? But I think there is this idea that you have this abundance of interesting ideas, and the thing that's difficult is to build the teams that can really take advantage of these new ideas. And in order to keeping anything to yourself really doesn't provide you with any advantage. On the other hand, collaborating with a lot of people gives you an advantage because that means you can move more quickly, and somehow that's still deeply ingrained in the culture.
So we wanted to take a couple of questions from the audience. So I guess maybe a summary of this discussion is, look, in Germany, maybe we don't value engineers as much as they are valued in Silicon Valley. And I think also it's easier once you're part of this ecosystem to really rise and shine, I think. All right, we have a couple of minutes left. Are there any questions in the audience that you might want to ask? Is there someone with a okay.
We can also repeat.
If you could give the gentleman the microphone, then you can ask a question.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much for your talk. My name is Alejandro Martin for a project. The name is Actutopia Lab. And my question is, you are talking about engineering mostly related to software engineering. But this engineering is quite new, 30 years ago or 40 years ago. And now my question is, what is your vision of the engineering? Because I believe a lot also in other new unknown developments, like because software is based in algorithm. But I was last month in MIT Media Lab, and they are studying a lot the sensations, the emotions, and there is another engineering that is coming that is not based in software, is based in different knowledge about the communication between humans and plants. And
engineering doesn't need to just be software, and especially in Silicon Valley, it can be hardware. I mean, that's where the iPhone was built. That's where like the iPod started. There's a lot of autonomous car stuff happening around there. There's a lot of the VR stuff happening around there. Oculus was, of course, very major in there, operated by Facebook now. I think engineering can be much more than software. The costs are higher, the margins are lower, and you can expect that those companies have to raise a lot more money. But it just goes back to the system that, well, you can raise that money, and because people will believe in just the idea as opposed to kind of really struggling to de-risk. So it's not just software, but yeah, there is a lot more different types of engineering, and they get the same respect as the software guys.
Twitter, just to add to that, I think some of the things you're getting at is like kind of user research and human interaction research and all of that. And I know that at Twitter we value the folks that work on user research a lot, thinking about interactions between humans and how the humans use computers and all of that stuff.
And design is really big too. Products, yeah. I mean, everything.
So one last question. Anyone? Sure.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I really enjoyed hearing about how the culture of Silicon Valley really enables a lot of these interactions and openness. How can we promote some of those values in places outside Silicon Valley? And what are some ways that we can encourage companies to support engineers the same way they do there, but maybe if they don't have as much to have the 3 espresso machines. What are some ways to kind of get those values to come out farther?
So maybe I'll take this one really quickly because we have actually an office in Hamburg, Germany. So we've at Mesosphere we've actually tried to create a really a really fun environment in our Hamburg office. We have a 3D printer, we have an electronics lab, so people hang out after work. We have even a CNC machine, so they actually tinker around. They stay after hours. I think making your workplace really fun is a big part of it. And I think for probably all of us, work and leisure time are not really separate, right?
That's right.
I don't know if you guys have any other ideas for her question.
I mean, conferences like this are really important too. Just getting people talking about it and setting the expectation that, hey, there's more to it than just going to work and doing the work. Go in there and enjoy it, and talking about the culture. There's a lot of really good books coming out. The Netflix story as well. Patty, I forget what her last name is, but her book just came out, and that's really good about culture within Netflix. There's lots of really great books on this too. And you and your colleagues, if people read these things, they will understand that it's not just all the top-down kind of system that you'll often find at many companies outside of the Valley.
I think proving to your prospective candidates that you are going to invest in them and their career as an engineer, and that their engineering career doesn't top out, just that they have to move into management or whatever, that you're willing to help them grow and learn, and all the things that Larry said earlier about you can fail, you can try things, and all of that. That to me is more important than the coffee machine.
You can get away with just 2 espresso machines. You don't need 3.
The key takeaway from this panel: 2 espresso machines is enough.
Yeah. Redundancy. Right. They like that.
We're about out of time. Thank you all so much for your insights.
Great.
Thanks,
Aaron.
Awesome.